Good morning, all. Welcome to the lecture series on application development using Python, module 4, lecture number 27.
So, in a previous lecture, we have concluded that objects are mutable. That means it's possible for us to change the state of an object. And changing the state of an object is nothing but changing the attribute of particular object. After that, we have studied copying function. And copy method is present in copy module, and this copy module provide two types of copying. So one is shallow copying and another is deep copying, and we have also differentiated between those two copying methods also. So after that, we have studied a few example programs which were based upon these two concepts. So in this lecture video, we are going to study how to create functions within class. So after that, we are going to study two types of functions. One is pure function, another is modifier function. So at the end of this lecture, student will have better understanding of how to create a function and what is the difference between pure function and modifier function. Let us start with classes and function. So till now we have studied how to create a class. After that, we have studied how to declare attribute within a class. So next step, we can say we are going to create functions. Creation of function is nothing but we are going to write a functions within class, and those function takes object as a parameter or argument. Even those functions are going to return these object as a results, or we can say return values. In order to understand this function concept, we'll consider a class with the name time. So this class time that records the time of the day. So this is the definition of a class. So in order to create a class with the name time, we are going to use one keyword, that is class. So this class time will be having three attributes. Those three attributes are hour, minute, second. So here we are creating a new time object and assign these values to attribute of object time. So this diagram represents object diagram of object time. So this complete diagram, this complete program shows time class. So here we have created a time class with the keyword class. So after that, a new object is created with the help of the time function. So attribute initialization, and here we are individually displaying those attribute of time object. So hour, minute, second. As a result, we will get this output. So coming to functions, there are mainly two types are there. One is pure function, another is modifier function. First we will study pure function, then we will move for modifier function. So definition of a pure function: a function that does not modify any of the object it receives as argument. So that type of function we call it as pure function. And most of the pure functions are fruitful. The meaning of fruitful is nothing but most of the time these pure functions are going to return some values. So here we have considered a definition for the one function, that is add time. So when we look at this definition of add time, it shows, so this add time function is taking two objects. Those two objects are 1 and 2. So this add time that takes two objects as a parameter. Within this function definition, it will create one more object with the name sum. After that, it will retrieve our attribute of first object, that is T1, and our object of second object, that is T2. It will retrieve our attribute of both the object, and those two values will be added to our attribute of sum. Similarly for minute as well as second. So corresponding values will be retrieved, and those will be saved in sum.minute, sum.second. So finally it will return sum object as a value. So we can say this function create a new time object. So new time object is sum, and initializes its attribute. So sum object attributes are hour, minute, second. Those three attributes are initialized, and returns a reference to the new object. So for such functions we call it as pure function, because it does not modify any of the object passed to it as a argument, and it has no effect also. That means we have passed these two objects as a argument. So these two objects are not modified. Because of that reason we call it as this function as a pure function. So in order to test this function, so whether it is a pure function or what, whether it is going to modify those two objects or what, so we will create a two time object. So first object is start. So this start that contains start time of the movie. We will just assume that movie name as Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So second object is duration. So that duration that represents runtime of the movie. So which is that runtime of the movie is 1 hour 35 minutes. So this add time that figures out, or this add time that returns when the movie will end. So this add time function should return one value. That value represents when a movie is going to end. So here we are creating first object, that is start. So these are the possible values for attributes of start. So this represents when movie is going to start. Next we have created one more object with the name duration. So these two objects belongs to a class called time. So duration object attributes are initialized with the value 1 hour 35 minutes. So that means hour attribute will be initialized to 1, minute will be initialized to 35, and second will be 0. So here we are calling add time. So for this function we are passing two objects as a argument. So when we call this function by passing these two objects as a parameter, the value of start and duration will be copied to T1 and T2. So after that it will create its own object, that is sum. So after that corresponding values will be added, and it will return one object. That object will be stored in a variable done. So after that we are calling one more function, that is a print time. So this print time that display the object attribute values. As a result of this we have got output as 10 hours or 10 o'clock 10:80, and when we look at this output, one question arises. So these are the three fields. So first field is hour field, second field is minute field, third field is second field. So first and third field will be having valid values but second field is not having valid value. That means usually in case of minutes we will be having possible values in the range 0 to 59. But here we have got a value which is 80, which is more than 59. So this result 1080 might not be what we were hoping for. The problem is that particular function does not deal with a case where the number of seconds or minutes add up to the more than 60. So when that happens, so that means when it contains a value more than 60 minutes or more than 60 seconds, we have to carry the extra second into a minute. That means if last will contain a value more than 60, on that case one carry will be added to minute column, or the extra minute into a hour column. That means if a minute will contain more than 15 and that is 60 minutes, one carry will be added to hour column. So in order to get a proper solution, we have modified previous function definition of add time. So this is improved solution. In improved solution, if a second value is greater than equal to 60, on that case from original attribute second, so 60 second will be subtracted. After that, one value will be added to the attribute minute of a sum object. Similar for minute. If a minute field contain more than 60 minutes, on that case from main minute attribute we are going to subtract one value, that is 60, and after subtraction we are going to add one value to the hour attribute of object sum. So finally we are going to return result, that is object sum. Once again we are going to call the function add time. By passing same object we will look at the output. Here also we have called this function add time and we are passing these two as a parameter. So on that case, it will return one object. That object is sum will be saved in a variable time. So this object will be passed to print time. As a result we have got output as 11:20. Yes, this is the right time value which we are expecting. So that represent if a movie starts from 9:45, if it is having a duration of 1 hour 35, it is going to complete at 11 o'clock 20 minutes. At this point we can conclude one thing, that the parameter which we have passed to this function are not modified. Those remain same. So that is the speciality of pure function. So to move ahead, next type of function is modifier. So this is the second type of function. A function that changes one or more of the object it receives as an argument. So that means a function which receives a particular object as an argument, it is going to change. So for such functions we call it as modifier. So most of the modifiers are void. They are not going to return any values. But previously we have studied that most of the pure functions are fruitful. So pure functions are going to return some values, but most of the time modifier functions are not going to return any values. That is, they are going to return one value, that is none. So here we are going to consider same function, that is increment. So which adds a given number of seconds to a time object and can return naturally as a modifier. So this function that plays the role of modifier. So let us verify this function whether it is a modifier or pure function. So here for this function we are passing, first one is object, second one is second. Once we pass one object and second argument as a parameter, first it will retrieve second attribute of time object. So for that second attribute of time object, it will be added seconds which we have passed as a argument. So after that it will checks if a second value, that is second attribute of time object, is greater than 60. On that case, from original value 60 will be subtracted and a value 1 will be added to minute. Similarly, in case of minutes, if it is greater than 60, so after this adding seconds, if it is greater than 60 minutes, so from original value 60 will be subtracted and one carry 1 will be added to hours. So in this function definition, it concludes that the object which we have passed as an argument is got modified. So its original value is going to change after adding this seconds value. So in that function definition increment, the first line perform basic operation and remainder deals with the special cases what we saw in the previous pure functions. So is this function correct? What happens if the seconds is much greater than 60? In that case, it is not enough to carry once, and we have to keep it doing until time dot second is less than 60. That means, let us take a simple example. So in a previous case, so here we have considered a value was 80. In order to handle this special case, so this snippet is enough. That means initially what it checks, so second value, in that case it is 0, but in case of minutes, first we will assume minutes. If it is greater than 60, so considered value is 80. So if it is 80 greater than 60, this result into true. So from 80, 60 will be subtracted. So remaining is 20. So 20 will be valid one. But we will assume second or minute. If it is greater than 2 times, so I will assume 130 seconds. If I assume second value as 130 with respect to this piece of code, what it does, so time dot second, that represent one value, that value is 130. 130 is greater than equal to 60. Yes, this condition result into true. On that case, so from original value 130, 60 will be subtracted. So remaining value is 70. That 70 remains same in second attribute, and only one will be added to many. Even 70 second is not going to represent proper value. Once again it has to check that condition again. Same procedure has to repeat again and again unless until its value is lesser than 60. Similarly for this also, if you assume its value is 130 minutes, on that case it has to repeat for how many times? 2 times. But when we are using if condition, if decision making, it is checking it for, or if it is repeating or it is performing this operation for only 1 time. So finally we can say only one solution is to replace if statement with while statement. That means if we replace if with while, so while followed by these conditions, and it is going to repeat unless until its value is lesser than 60. On that case we are going to get the final correct output. So this makes end of this lecture. Let us summarize the topics what we have studied in this lecture. So first we have studied how to declare or define a function within class, and we have studied two different type of functions. So first one is pure function, second one is modifier function, and we have concluded that pure functions are going to return one fruitful value. That means most of the pure functions are going to return one value. And we also concluded that pure functions are not going to modify the parameter which we have passed as a object. So whatever the object we have passed as a argument for pure functions, those not going to modify. But that is not the case in case of modifier function. Object which we were passed as an argument, those objects got modified. So that is the speciality of modifier function. And most of the time, most modifier functions are going to return one value. That value is none.